Good evening and welcome to the Hairenik Media Newscast, bringing you the latest headlines from the homeland and the region, along with community news and more. In a major geopolitical shift, a declaration was signed on August 8 at the White House between Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, mediated by U.S. President Donald Trump. The agreement, renaming the so-called Zangezur corridor the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, signals Armenia's acceptance of a transit corridor through its Syunik province while granting the U.S. exclusive development rights. Framed as a strategic partnership, the deal comes at a steep cost. The apparent legal abandonment of the Artsakh issue through a joint Armenian-Azerbaijani withdrawal from the OSCE Minsk Group, and the acceptance of key Azerbaijani demands, including constitutional changes in Armenia. The agreement has sparked serious concerns in Armenia and across the diaspora, as critics warn it threatens Armenian sovereignty, erases Artsakh from the international agenda, and opens the door to long-term regional instability, with deeply troubling and uncertain consequences for the country's future. Those concerns were only reinforced when both Pashinyan and Aliyev dodged a reporter's question about whether the displaced people of Artsakh will ever be allowed to return. Pashinyan responded with a joke about nominating Trump for a Nobel Prize, avoiding the serious issue. Instead of standing up for his nation, Pashinyan stood silently beside Aliyev, not as a leader or a voice for his people, but as a silent accomplice in their humiliation. There was no outrage, no defense, no dignity, just laughter in the face of one of the greatest tragedies in modern Armenian history. While Aliyev acts in Azerbaijan's interests, Pashinyan has abandoned his own people. This is not diplomacy, it's betrayal. The ARF Bureau condemned the Washington agreements that trample upon the collective rights and vital interests of the Armenian people, create new security challenges and threats, undermine the military-political balance in the region, and jeopardize the territorial integrity of the Republic of Armenia, calling into question the very existence of Armenian statehood. This inherently anti-state declaration, reflecting the anti-national and short-sighted policy adopted by the ruling administration, has a single aim: to ensure the reproduction of the ruling administration that serves foreign interests, at the cost of Armenia's rights, turning Armenia into an arena for geopolitical confrontation. Given Azerbaijan's continuous preconditions, genocidal actions against the Armenians of Artsakh, the ethnic cleansing and complete depopulation of Artsakh, the seizure of Republic of Armenia territories, the sham trials in Baku, the denial of the right of return for Artsakh Armenians, and the willful blindness of major powers to all of this in pursuit of their own interests, establishing an atmosphere of trust between Armenia and Azerbaijan, is not only unrealistic, but capitulatory in nature. The ARF Bureau statement goes on to declare the following: the Artsakh conflict remains unresolved, and the international community, particularly the OSCE, as the only platform with a legitimate international mandate, must work toward its resolution. The signed declaration effectively legitimizes the concept of a corridor that serves solely Azerbaijani interests. Granting Azerbaijan unimpeded communication through the territory of the Republic of Armenia under any name or status amounts to the implementation of a Turan corridor and constitutes a violation of Armenian sovereignty. The statement continues: we demand the withdrawal of Azerbaijan's armed forces from the territory of the Republic of Armenia, the immediate release of Artsakh's political and military hostages, and the creation of conditions that ensure the safe, guaranteed, and dignified collective return of the displaced Armenian population of Artsakh. We firmly believe that a status quo established through military aggression and genocidal crimes cannot lead to lasting peace. The Armenian Revolutionary Federation reaffirms its commitment to the international principles of establishing democracy, justice, and dignified peace. The Armenian Revolutionary Federation Eastern Region Central Committee issued a statement forcefully condemning the agreements, characterizing the documents as a coordinated act of betrayal that dismantles Armenia's sovereignty, erases Artsakh from the international agenda, and fractures the Armenian homeland. The statement further noted that 3 documents were signed: Armenia's withdrawal from the OSCE Minsk Group, the creation of the so-called Trump route for international peace and prosperity, which cuts through Armenia's sovereign Syunik province, and a framework peace agreement codifying the 17-point arrangement between Pashinyan and Aliyev in March 2025, an arrangement never presented to, let alone ratified by the Armenian people. The March agreement, the ARF statement added, reads like an enemy's wish list. Constitutional changes to remove all references to Artsakh, abandoning Armenia's moral and legal responsibility for its defense, dissolution of the OSCE Minsk Group, a ban on third-party border monitors, eliminating deterrence against Azerbaijani aggression, withdrawal of Armenia's international legal cases, erasing accountability for war crimes and the 2023 genocide in Artsakh, commitments to open communications that pave the way for the so-called Zangezur corridor, regardless of the name, a calculated loss of sovereignty, an agreement to allow 300,000 Azerbaijanis to return to Armenia under Aliyev's irredentist Western Azerbaijan plan. Omitted entirely from the agreement is any provision for the release of Armenian prisoners of war or other detainees held illegally in Azerbaijan. The statement added that Pashinyan's signatures bear the indelible stain of illegitimacy, a betrayal delivered without mandate, consultation, or regard for the sacrifices of generations. In Washington, he acted not as Armenia's defender, but as the instrument of foreign agendas, codifying the demands of Baku and Ankara and trading away sovereignty for political survival. By granting Azerbaijan unimpeded access through Armenia's territory, abandoning Artsakh on the international stage, accepting terms that invite demographic and political subversion, and making no demand for the return of Armenian POWs, Pashinyan has betrayed the sacrifices of generations who defended the Armenian homeland. The Trump administration shares full responsibility for legitimizing this betrayal. Rather than holding Azerbaijan accountable for its aggression, genocide, and expansionism, Trump chose to reward Aliyev, appease Ankara, and erase the plight of over 150,000 forcibly displaced Armenians from Artsakh. This was not peace. It was pipelines, power, and political vanity at the expense of justice and sovereignty. The ARF Eastern region reaffirmed that despite its wounds, the Armenian nation remains awake, aware, and organized. We will not be silenced. We will not be erased to accommodate the whims of despots or the ambitions of presidents. History will record this moment and will judge those who stood in defense of our nation and those who remained silent in the face of its betrayal. We reject this corridor. We reject these agreements. We reject this betrayal, the statement concluded. The Armenian National Committee of America sharply criticized the U.S.-brokered Armenia-Azerbaijan agreement as a dangerous deal that ignores justice, undermines Armenia's sovereignty, and rewards Azerbaijani unpunished aggression. ANCA Executive Director Aram Hamparian criticized President Trump for enabling ethnic cleansing and stated that true peace requires return of displaced Armenians, release of hostages, protection of Christian sites, and Azerbaijani withdrawal, none of which are addressed in the agreement. One of the most troubling aspects of the agreement, the ANCA statement added, is President Trump's decision to waive Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, lifting the U.S. ban on military aid to Azerbaijan, warning that this undermines U.S. leverage while Azerbaijani forces still occupy Armenian territory and hold prisoners. Following the talks at the White House, Armenian Caucus co-chair Representative Frank Pallone stressed that any final agreement must include strong enforcement mechanisms and security guarantees for Armenia. He criticized the U.S. decision to waive Section 907, stating there's no justification for providing military aid to Azerbaijan. Pallone also urged stronger U.S. pressure on President Aliyev to release prisoners, withdraw troops from Armenian territory, and ensure the safe and dignified return of displaced Armenians to their indigenous homeland of Nagorno-Karabakh. Congressman Brad Sherman, vice chair of the Congressional Armenian Caucus, strongly opposed any weapons transfers to Azerbaijan and called for the immediate release of all Armenian POWs held by Azerbaijani forces. Sherman stressed that Azerbaijan must be held accountable for its aggression and urged the U.S. to provide stronger, tangible security guarantees to Armenia. He also emphasized that the U.S. should maintain the Section 907 ban on military aid to Azerbaijan. Former Armenian Foreign Minister Vartan Oskanian warned that the documents signed in Washington carry serious consequences for Armenia's sovereignty. There is no Artsakh, no Lachin quarter, no Armenian presence in Artsakh. Azerbaijan is gaining uninterrupted corridor to Nakhichevan, Oskanian said in a video message. He criticized the Armenian government for effectively granting a strategic part of Armenia to another country's control for 99 years, allowing Azerbaijan uninterrupted access. This is unprecedented, unconstitutional, and entirely unacceptable, he emphasized, adding that Aliyev has not signed the peace treaty, but he secured major concessions: the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk Group, an unimpeded corridor, and Armenia's commitment not to reverse previous agreements. Legal experts and human rights groups have urged Armenia's foreign ministry to engage a neutral third country, such as Switzerland, to monitor Armenian captives held in Azerbaijan, following the International Committee of the Red Cross's forced withdrawal from Baku. With ICRC access cut off, experts warn the 23 Armenian prisoners are now isolated, facing physical and psychological abuse and even death. Siranush Sahakyan, representative for Armenian POWs at the European Court of Human Rights, stressed that only third-party visits can ensure proper oversight. Switzerland has signaled willingness to act if Armenia submits a formal request. However, the Armenian Foreign Ministry has not responded to the appeals for over 3 months, reportedly still discussing the proposal. Critics argue that delaying action for the sake of ongoing peace talks is unacceptable and endangers lives. Christian Solidarity International, CSI, has raised concerns over the worsening situation of Armenian detainees in Azerbaijan, nearly 2 years after the 2023 military offensive that emptied Artsakh of its Armenian Christian population. At least 23 Armenians remain in Azerbaijani custody, with 80 more forcibly disappeared. CSI warns their safety is at greater risk as the International Committee of the Red Cross is set to close its Baku office in September, ending independent monitoring of detainee conditions. Tensions remain high near Armenia's southern borders as Azerbaijani forces opened fire on an Armenian tractor near Verishen village in the Syunik region, approximately 4.5 kilometers inside Armenian territory. Azerbaijan currently occupies nearby areas around Sevlij and Ishkhanasar, totaling an estimated 16 square kilometers of Armenian land. The Armenian Defense Ministry reported no casualties and urged Azerbaijan to conduct an investigation, while Baku outright denied any incident occurred, claiming no shots were fired. Commentators sharply criticized Armenia's response as naive, warning that peace cannot be one-sided. Following the U.S.-brokered talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan in Washington, Russia has pushed back strongly against being excluded from the peace process. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova emphasized that any final settlement between Baku and Yerevan must consider Moscow's position, stressing that the normalization process initially began with Russia's involvement. She called for the resolution to be shaped by regional powers, namely Russia, Iran, and Turkey, and highlighted the validity of existing trilateral agreements involving Russia, as well as the continued presence of Russian border guards in Armenia. Meanwhile, Russian Duma Deputy Konstantin Zatulin accused both Armenian Prime Minister and Azerbaijani President of turning their backs on Russian mediation. He claimed the two leaders are now seeking Western backing, particularly from the United States, as part of a broader effort to sideline Russia in the South Caucasus. Zatulin criticized Pashinyan directly, accusing him of once again betraying his people, a pattern that is, he said, unfortunately familiar given his record on Nagorno-Karabakh. Iran has voiced concern over Armenia's decision to grant the U.S. exclusive rights to a transit corridor through the Syunik region, which connects Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan. While welcoming the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Iran's foreign ministry expressed concern over the negative consequences of any form of foreign intervention, especially near its shared borders, that could undermine the security and lasting stability of the region. Earlier, Ali Akbar Velayati, senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, warned that any attempt to push for the so-called Zangezur corridor will face a firm Iranian response. He condemned foreign powers seeking to impose this transport route through southern Armenia, a move Tehran sees as a threat to regional balance and its role as a key east-to-west transit hub. In a strong warning about Armenia's political trajectory, former Foreign Minister Vartan Oskanian has called on foreign embassies and international human rights organizations to respond to what he describes as a country's accelerating descent into authoritarianism. In a letter, Oskanian pointed to the politically motivated detention of opposition figures, clergy, and civic activists as evidence of a coordinated campaign to suppress dissent. He urged international partners to tie democratic assistance to measurable reforms, especially in the areas of judicial independence, due process, and political pluralism. This plea comes amid growing concerns over media freedom in Armenia. As the government advances a controversial media law, critics warn could usher in authoritarian-style censorship. The draft legislation includes vaguely worded bans on content that promotes war or threatens the constitutional order, language that media watchdogs say invites arbitrary enforcement, license revocations, and restrictions on foreign content, mirroring tactics used in Azerbaijan. In a related development, Aravot newspaper, one of Armenia's oldest independent outlets, was evicted from its longtime offices in the state-owned Yerevan Press building, widely seen as retaliation for its critical coverage of the government. This incident reflects a broader pressure on independent media, with data from the first half of 2025 revealing a sharp rise in legal actions: 15 lawsuits filed against media outlets, 12 initiated by government officials, accounting for nearly 70% of all such cases. Ranked 34th on the 2025 Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index, Armenia faces growing international concern over its democratic backsliding and the erosion of free press protections. In a stark illustration of double standards in Armenia's legal system, the courts have denied release to political prisoner Arvan Artsakh, despite his critical medical condition. A cancer survivor, now partially paralyzed, Artsakh remains in prison without proper medical care, raising alarm among rights advocates who warn that Armenia may be violating European human rights standards by continuing to detain someone in such a condition. Meanwhile, in a separate case exposing troubling prosecutorial bias, attorney Roman Yerityan revealed that the prosecutor's office has appealed court decisions mandating investigations into hate speech directed at the people of Artsakh. According to Yerityan, the prosecutors argued that such speech is permissible and normal, and that pursuing legal action would infringe on freedom of expression. The contrast is jarring. A gravely ill political prisoner is denied compassion, while dehumanizing rhetoric against a displaced and traumatized population is effectively defended by the state. Armenia and the U.S. will conduct the Eagle Partner 2025 joint military drills from August 12 to 20 in Armenia. The exercise will involve members of Armenia's Peacekeeping Brigade, U.S. Army Europe and Africa, and the Kansas National Guard, with a primary focus on peacekeeping operations, especially medical evacuation. The goals include improving interoperability, tactical communication, and the readiness of Armenia's peacekeeping forces as part of ongoing international training efforts. According to multiple reports, the Trump administration is actively negotiating with Azerbaijan and exploring partnerships with several Central Asian states to bring them into the Abraham Accords, thereby deepening their existing ties with Israel through symbolic participation rather than full normalization. As part of these discussions, U.S. officials have indicated that Baku's inclusion in the Accords hinges on reaching a peace agreement with Armenia, a prerequisite for joining the framework. His Holiness Karekin II, Catholicos of all Armenians, has begun a pontifical visit to the Eastern Diocese of the Armenian Church of America. The trip includes meetings with church leaders and supporters to discuss ongoing programs of the Holy Echmiadzin. And finally, in local community news, the 104th Convention of the Armenian Relief Society of Eastern USA was held from July 31 to August 2 in Detroit, Michigan. The event brought together 46 delegates from 24 chapters, along with members of the ARS Central and Regional Executive Boards, organizational representatives, and guests. The event opened with remarks by the ARS Regional Executive Chairwoman Carolyn Shamavonian, prayer and blessings from the Prelate of the Eastern Prelacy, His Eminence Archbishop Anushavan Tanyelian, and additional reflections from ARF Eastern U.S. Central Committee member Zovinar Hamakordzian and ARS Central Executive Board member Irma Kasabian. Certificates of appreciation were presented to honor long-standing members for their dedicated service, including special recognition for half a century of continuous membership. Over the 3-day convention, delegates reviewed organizational reports, celebrated dedicated service, and focused on key priorities such as recruitment, finances, education, and outreach. The convention concluded with the election of a new regional executive board to serve a 2-year term, consisting of Mimi Parselian, Nora Man, Aniz Argarian, Talar Abdalian, Anush Bargamian, Tamitsa Dakisyan, and Liza Buruchian. And now we're joined by ANCA National Grassroots Director Gev Iskachian. Last Friday, President Trump hosted Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev for what has been called a groundbreaking peace agreement. Let's begin by briefly outlining the key points of this deal for our viewers. Does it address the core concerns of the Armenian people, such as the return of displaced Armenians, the release of prisoners, and the protection of cultural heritage? And does it truly mark a turning point for peace? More broadly, what should a genuine and lasting peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan include to ensure justice and stability for all parties involved?
This deal centers around U.S.-controlled infrastructure. It's been referred to as the TRIPP. Folks refer to it as the Trump route. The Azeris call it the Zangezur corridor. This essentially grants a 99-year lease to foreign private entities to develop infrastructure on sovereign Armenian land. Fundamentally, we see a problem with that. But we also strongly criticized this quote-unquote peace deal because it sidesteps core Armenian priorities. It fails to ensure the return of displaced Armenians, the release of prisoners, the protection of cultural heritage, or accountability for war crimes. Instead, it rewards Azerbaijan. It rewards their ethnic cleansing while undermining Armenian sovereignty. For us, a genuine, lasting peace must include justice and accountability, including addressing war crimes and ethnic cleansing, the full return of displaced Armenians to Artsakh, the release of prisoners and hostages who are still in detention, the protection of cultural and religious heritage, and real security guarantees and sovereignty protections for the people of Armenia. In lack of those things, this deal is completely flawed and incomplete.
Supporters of the agreement say it could drive economic growth and bring an end to decades of conflict. What is the ANCA's perspective on this? And from your point of view, what should a real and lasting peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan include to ensure justice and stability?
These so-called economic promises, and I want to stress on the word promises because the details of this deal are not out. What the economic implications may be, whether Armenia has control of the customs and whether tariffs will be in place or any of those other economic conditions that matter. We have no sight of those. We are in the dark on many of those points on this deal. And those economic promises cannot replace justice. Calling for infrastructural perks alone is not peace if core Armenian rights are sacrificed. Without justice and enforceable commitments such as sovereignty protections, right of return, and prisoner release, those economic gains are hollow. And none of those economic gains are guaranteed. What happens to the economic stability of the people in Mehri, in Sunik, who have no real protections on their livelihoods, let alone their businesses and their ability to extract any sort of economic gain from something like this?
What has been the reaction of the U.S. Congress to the peace agreement signed at the White House? Have lawmakers expressed support or raised concerns? Do they consider erasing Artsakh, abandoning Christian sites, forsaking hostages and displaced Armenians, and accepting Azerbaijani occupation without guarantees for the sustainable return of Armenians to their ancestral lands to be a genuine path to peace?
The congressional response backed by the ANCA has been, for the most part, sharply critical. You see statements coming out from Congressman Frank Pallone, who chairs the Armenian caucus. You see statements come out of Congressman Gabe Amo, who has been deeply connected to Armenian issues here in Washington, D.C. And they have said the same things that we have. They have insisted that any peace must guarantee sovereignty, must guarantee a prisoner release, and the right of return for those Armenians who were ethnically cleansed. We as the ANCA urge Congress to resist forced one-sided concessions. Our warning is that such a deal would legitimize ethnic cleansing and compromise Armenian security. In short, a lot of these lawmakers do not view erasing Artsakh, forsaking hostages, or institutionalizing occupation without guarantees as a genuine path to peace, and they are right for calling it as that.
What is your view on the possibility of waiving Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act to provide military assistance to Azerbaijan? Is it appropriate to support Azerbaijan militarily in this context? Shouldn't a peace agreement include strong enforcement mechanisms and security guarantees for Armenia to ensure that Azerbaijan fully complies with its terms?
The ANC firmly opposes waiving Section 907, which restricts U.S. aid to Azerbaijan, especially given ongoing Azerbaijani aggression and unresolved human rights issues. We're not just talking about their ethnic cleansing, the war in 2020. We're talking about what's going on in border villages and towns in Sunik today, as Azerbaijan continuously fires and threatens the lives of many of these peaceful civilians. By waiving Section 907 and refusing to enforce it, what the U.S. is essentially doing is providing weapons after a peace deal to an aggressor state. How in any sort of functioning society can that be the case? How is it that we can, on one hand, say that we're advocating for peace, and on the other hand, arm and equip a dictatorial state who has been known to provoke, who has been known for acts of hostility and aggression, who continues to fire on peaceful civilians? How can we today arm them with weapons and somehow call this a peace deal? That does not make sense. Those things do not add up for us.
Now, 3 days after the signing of the agreement, what are the Armenian National Committee of America's immediate priorities and next steps?
The ANCA plans to do today what they have been doing yesterday and for the last 2 years. We plan to continue to advocate for the return of the people of Artsakh. We continue to advocate for the release of POWs. We continue to ask for strong enforcement mechanisms, binding security guarantees for Armenia, and strict accountability to ensure Azerbaijan complies fully with the terms of the so-called peace, rather than rewarding aggression. And we plan to do this unapologetically. We plan to move steadfast in this regard, and our position is firm and strong and principled. When it comes to the people of Artsakh, there's no peace without addressing their rightful return. When it comes to the safety of Armenians, when it comes to the guarantee of Armenian sovereignty, when it comes to justice and accountability for war crimes, we do not see, in the absence of enforcement, any legitimate peace being conducted, any legitimate peace coming to form, in the absence of any of those things that we mentioned. When there is no accountability, when there is no justice, when there is no dignity, there cannot be peace. And until those issues are addressed, we will move steadfast in this regard.
Armenian National Committee of America Grassroots Director Gev Iskadjian, thank you. That's all for tonight's broadcast. Thank you for joining, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Good night.